Himeko has a lot of room to shine with Kafka, and the reason being is because these two characters have a lot of synergy with one another. Let's just state the obvious. Both excel in AoE situations. Both have damage over time in their kits, one being a character centered around damage over time, and the other being able to apply dots alongside her great AoE damage. There's a lot to explain, so let's just get started. Himeko is a character for the longest time that hasn't really had a place other than being able to clear out trash mobs in the game. But what if I told you she has a very special place with a very special character that is literally going to appear today? Now there's two things we have to go over. The first thing being is that Himeko is actually able to apply dots, which was a effect added to her kit from the CBT to the launch of the game, and she's able to apply a dot using either a basic attack, an elemental skill, an ultimate, or a follow-up attack, all of which have a 50% chance of applying that dot to the enemy. And as you all know, damage over time scales based off of the wearer's max attack. This will matter later in the video. We go over all of the multipliers to take into consideration when it comes to the max damage of Himeko's dots. Himeko has a follow-up attack that gains charges whenever the enemy has their toughness bar broken. So in this case, either Himeko or Kafka will be the ones destroying the enemy's toughness bar, or Asta, which we'll explain later in the video. And if any of those characters were to break the toughness bar of the enemy 3 times, and considering this will be really massive in AoE situations, then Himeko will follow up with a follow-up attack and is able to put a dot on the enemies, which will in turn boost the damage of Kafka, proccing that damage over time. Himeko also gains a lot of fire damage bonuses in her kit, which allows her to do more damage with her damage over time, because as you all know, damage over time scales based off of elemental damage bonuses as well. So a character that is able to excel really well in AoE situations will work alongside Kafka, a character that also excels in AoE situations. And if that character is also able to apply dots in their AoE situations, then that character will work even better with a character like Kafka, who also applies dots. So what if I told you this 5-star light cone, Himeko's best in slot from the standard banner, or should I say not necessarily best in slot depending on where you use the character, but in this situation pertaining with Kafka, this will definitely be her best in slot because it gives a massive attack boost to the character, which enables her to do more damage with her dots, and it gives a damage bonus, which is more damage for her dots as well, on top of being a 5-star light cone, which has higher base stats than every single 4-star light cone in the game. And as you all know, the Aru edition doesn't have very many light cones that is able to boost the damage of the characters in that path. Think of Jing Yuan and having his light cone be his best in slot, because it's the only good Aru edition option for AoE damage dealers at this point. Another thing worth mentioning is that a character like Asta would work really well in team composition with Himeko and Kafka. I would argue best in slot, because of the buff she provides to Himeko while also buffing Kafka. We already understand exactly what she provides for Kafka, in instance of it being a speed buff and attack buff, which increases the speed of Kafka, thus allowing Kafka to proc the dots more often, and giving an attack buff to Kafka, which doesn't have any turn duration other than Asta taking her turn. But she does a lot more than that, and for a character like Himeko, she has a lot of massive supporting attributes to provide to the character. Let me explain. Asta gives an 18% damage bonus for the fire element whenever she's on the field. This is very important to take into consideration because, like the other buffs Asta provides, this also has no turn duration. Asta also provides a damage over time effect onto the enemy for 3 turns, which is pretty cool if you take into consideration all of the attack increases she provides for the team and for herself as well, and the fire damage bonuses that she also provides for the team. It's very good. Now let's talk about the 4-star light cone that Asta will be using in the team comp with Kafka and Himeko, and that is Planetary Rendezvous. This light cone allows Asta to provide a further damage bonus increase for Himeko. In this case, it would be fire, so that's why I say Himeko. This 4-star light cone damage bonus scales up to 24% depending on the refinements you have on it, which is a massive amount of damage bonuses for a character that's going to be applying dots to the enemy. So in total, you would get a 42% damage bonus for a character that is going to be A, doing a lot of AoE damage, and B, providing damage over time effects onto the enemy that Kafka will also be proccing. So let's just say Asta is a character that works really well with Himeko. all the buffs she provides seems like it was tailor-made for the character. Now, I might be a little biased because, as you all know, she's one of my favorite characters, but I think after you find out how valuable she is, she might also become one of your favorite characters. At the time of my recording, you probably have already seen a lot of showcases with Kafka. You probably have seen a lot of the damage output this character provides, and you also have seen some of her best teams. But Kafka will be a very nice character to use with Himeko. In AoE situations, you find yourself fighting enemies that have fire weakness, or maybe you find yourself having these two characters and maybe you have that 5-star light cone that can be utilized on Himeko. These two characters will work pretty well together because they both function relatively the same. They both have very nice AoE damage, and they both have damage over times in their kit. One being tailor-made for damage over time, and like I said earlier in the video, the other being tailor-made for AoE damage. It just so happens that both of them end up having damage over time in their kits, so there is synergy to be had, as Kafka is the one that is proccing the damage over time that Himeko will be providing. As you see, Kafka was previously able to further boost the damage over time damages that the enemy will take, so she essentially increased the damage over time that the enemy will take, essentially like Sampo when he increases the damage over time vulnerability on the enemies with his ultimate. Well, Kafka did pretty much the same thing. Now, there has been a slight change in that. The reason being is that Kafka's damage over time vulnerability increased on the enemy has now been changed to one of her Eidolons. And if you're able to snipe that Eidolon or get that Eidolon for the character, or maybe you are someone that spins on the game and you were going to get Eidolons for Kafka anyways, or maybe you got lucky, well, you will have a further damage increase to provide to Himeko in order to boost the dots that she will provide even more, while also increasing the damage over time that Kafka puts onto the enemy. So it's a win-win. I don't think anyone can complain about that. So I know what you all might be thinking. Pitch Dark Hook the Great has a higher damage scaling damage over time effect than Himeko does. Yeah, that's true, but you have to take into consideration Hook is a 4-star and Himeko is a 5-star. Hook is also a destruction character, meaning Hook is not able to utilize all the things that Himeko is able to utilize in order to boost her dot damage. So a character like Hook wouldn't really work well with a character like Kafka, and the reason being is because Hook has adjacent AoE damage over time application, where a character like Himeko has AoE damage and AoE damage over time application. So the reason being is that you can argue, well, Hook has more damage over time damage than a character like Himeko, but Hook wouldn't function in the same team alongside a character like Kafka versus a character like Himeko would in that team. But you have to understand that a character like Hook wouldn't work better than a character like Himeko in this instance. And the reason being is because one applies more dots and one has more AoE coverage. So that's why I didn't even bother mentioning Pitch Dark Hook the Great. And it wasn't because I don't like this character. I think she has the best companion quest in the game. It just so happens that she isn't tailor-made for this team composition I cooked up, whereas Himeko is made for the team. Now let's talk about one last thing. There is a future character that leads me to believe that 4-star Asta will be power crept at some point. I believe a character that is able to provide a speed buff, also able to provide an attack buff, while also being able to boost the weakness break effect of a character like Kafka and a character like Himeko would essentially be a better fit character in that team's composition. And the reason being is because you want to take advantage of weakness break effect anyways in AoE situations. So if that character is able to do everything Asta provides while being a 5-star in maybe a different element while giving extra weakness break effect, I think that character would be a better suited character in the team composition. So there you have it, and there is Pom Pom crying right now. But Himeko is a character that has a lot of potential with Kafka. And the reason I haven't mentioned the defensive option in that team comp is because I left it open for you to decide. You can put whatever defensive option you want to put in that team slot, long as they are very skill point positive. The character has to be a defensive option that is skill point positive, that is essentially able to be a self-sustaining defensive option. So a character like Fu Xuan might be really good in that team comp. But only time will tell if that is a character you want to even put in the team composition. But it leads me to believe that I think she'll probably be best in that team comp, because it seems like with her being the first limited preservation character, she's going to essentially provide a lot more than the current cast of preservation characters, and I would say just any defensive option overall. So this team is obviously not going to be Kafka's best in slot team. I think it's going to be a really solid team, a really good team, and a really viable team. I think it's going to be a very fun team because you're essentially able to utilize a part of Himeko's kit that isn't utilized as well as it is currently. So a character like Kafka will utilize that part of Himiko's kit much more than it was utilized before. And that sounds like fun to me. Hopefully your Kafka pulls go well when you get the character early, and I'll see you all in the next video. Have a good rest of your day. Peace.